You're listening to the Business Brain Food Podcast. This is episode 142.
Welcome to the Business Brain Food Podcast, the show business owners listen to when they want to take their business to the next level. Head to businessbrainfood.com.au to catch up on past episodes and access show notes from every interview. Now, here's your host, Ben Futrell.
Well, g'day and welcome back to another episode of Business Brain Food. This, my friend, is the podcast that's 100%, maybe 120, 150, let's go for 200% devoted to taking you and your business to the next level. And the good news is, it doesn't matter whether you're brand new to this business thing, so maybe you're just scratching that entrepreneurial itch, or maybe you're like myself and you've been in business for a long, long time. The good news is, no matter what stage you're at, there's always something new we can do to take our business to the next level, and today is absolutely no different. I always do a bit of air guitar when that intro comes in. Absolutely love that track and the bit of air guitar. Well, if you're a long-time listener, welcome back. If you're a new listener, welcome to the Business Brain Food Podcast. Glad to have you here. Today, we are going to be talking podcasting. I've got Rob Greenlee from Spreaker. Well, not just from Spreaker. Rob is an avid podcaster, a guy who knows the ins and outs of podcasting, what it's doing, where it's going, and why you should be doing it as a business owner. And we'll talk about that shortly. Before I do that, I wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Balloonatic, because Mrs. Balloonatic has gone and left a review in the iTunes store, which is something that I have been asking for people to help me out with, and I do really appreciate it when people jump in there and do that. So I wanted to just quickly read out Mrs. Balloonatic's review. She said, I only recently discovered Ben's podcast channel, and I've listened to this pretty much exclusively now every chance I get. I'm working my way backwards and are down to number 79. Listening to all the amazing entrepreneurs from all over the world on a regular basis has really lifted my beliefs and given me a new enthusiasm for driving my own business in a new direction, and is helping me he's helping me to think and believe way bigger than what I have in the past. Thanks heaps, Ben. You always ask your guests fantastic questions. Warm regards, Michelle Patterson. Thank you, Michelle. So good to get these reviews in. And if you are enjoying the show, please head across to the iTunes store, leave an honest review or rating. And what I'm going to do is, if you leave a review for me, I'm going to give you access to one of our members only trainings, a 1-hour training on user experience, the 3 secrets to making sure that your website converts visitors into customers. And it's a 55 or 56 minute training that only our clients typically have access to. But I'm going to make it available for you if you leave a review in the iTunes store. Now, the way that you're going to do this is you're going to leave a review, take a screenshot of that, or at least just copy and paste the text, stick it into an email, ben@maxmyprofit.com.au. If you send that to me at that email address, when I receive it, we get your actual email address, because a lot of the usernames in iTunes are difficult to know who they are. And I will return an email to you with a link to watch that training on user experience. That's my way of saying thank you. So head into the iTunes store, leave an honest review rating. I really do appreciate it, and I would love for you to do that for me. All right, so let's have a chat about podcasting, because I have got Rob Greenlee on today. Rob Greenlee is a head of content at a company called Spreaker. Now, if you go to Spreaker.com, that's Spreaker.com, it's a platform that's been built to make it really easy for you to be able to podcast. Now, you're probably saying, well, why would I podcast? Well, let me tell you that over the last 3 years, this podcast has led to me not only getting new customers. It does play a part in that. I have people come along to my events. I have people going to my website. I have people contacting me because they have listened to the show and they want some help in their business. That's one aspect of what it's done. The second aspect that I think is an amazing sort of unexpected benefit that I've got through doing this is the people that I have now relationships with. If you go back through my guest list, I've had people on this show that are amazing. Like Rob now from Spreaker. I've had John DeMartini. I've had Guy Kawasaki. I've had amazing people. I've had Daniel Flynn from the Thank You Group. I've had Dale Beaumont. I've had Timbo Reid from the Small Business Big Marketing show on here. I've had John Lee Dooms. I've had some amazing people. And so all of these people, what that does is it makes a connection. So, I've got 142 episodes now, 142 connections that I wouldn't have made if it wasn't for this podcast. And so, the people that we're interviewing are typically movers and shakers. They're doing amazing things in the world, and it's great to be connected with them. And that was sort of an unexpected benefit. Along with the third thing that I think is great is it keeps me connected without me knowing it with a lot of my customers. And I love my customers. I've got hundreds of them, and it's difficult for me to be able to one-on-one give them my time every single week in any other way, as where this does it in a leveraged way. And a big shout out to all our members, by the way. Absolutely love what you're doing, inspired by how you're growing your business, and love the fact that you tune into my podcast each week, because it really, gives me that satisfaction. If you were the only people that tuned in to this podcast, we have thousands of downloads, but if you were the only people, I would be grateful. That's all I would need. And I bump into people in our office, at our events, and they come up and say, Ben, love that interview you did with XYZ or with such and such. Loving the show. It's inspiring me. And, I know Michelle, has been working with us. Michelle, it's great to hear that it's inspiring to have a better belief in herself and build a better business. That's what we're here for. And that's what I stand for, is helping you build the business that you imagined. And that's what podcasting is all about. So I thought, it's been a while since I've had somebody on the show to talk about the benefits of podcasting and how it can help you in your business. So, getting Rob on the show from Spreaker. Rob has got several of his own podcasts, some live shows. We're going to talk in this interview a little bit about the state of podcasting in 2017. What are the stats? Is listenership on the up? Who knows? Let's have a chat about that. If you're going to start a podcast, what format should it be? How long should it be? How often should you do them? What should you talk about? We're going to talk a bit about technology, and you'll be surprised how easy it is for you to start a podcast. In fact, if after listening to this show you want to start a podcast, you could go to JB Hi-Fi if you're in Australia. You go to Amazon.com. You can go and buy yourself one microphone for about $100, and you can start podcasting. I believe you could buy nothing, just use your Apple or Android device, and you could just start recording a podcast, and you could live stream it. So it's just amazing. So, this interview by Rob, I absolutely love Rob coming on the show, and I love, his relaxed style as he takes you through the benefits of podcasting and how to make sure that you get the very best out of building your own podcast and make sure you get a result out of it. So without any further delay, let's get him onto the Business Brain Food podcast.
Business Brain Food.
Super pumped to have Rob on the Business Brain Food podcast. Welcome to the show, my friend.
It's great to be here, Ben. It's fantastic. I'm calling all the way from Seattle, so it's cool.
Hey, my absolute pleasure, mate. We're piping you directly into Australia, into the future. You don't even have to go 88 miles, which you'd have to do if you're in the DeLorean. You don't have to do that here.
That's right. Exactly.
Now, before we do get stuck into having a chat with you today, I'm going to ask you the same question I ask every single guest, and that is for you to share something quirky about yourself.
Well, I think
it's time for something quirky. And now, something quirky.
The quirkiest thing probably about my background and some things that I've done in my past, I'm a Guinness Book of World Record holder.
Wow.
But you'll probably never guess what that was. It was I built the world's largest glass of orange juice.
The largest glass of orange juice?
Of orange juice, yes.
How big was this?
It was about, the glass is about 10 feet tall, and it held about 750 gallons of pasteurized orange juice from Tropicana.
So for those of us that are in the metric system, that's about 3,000 litres. That's a lot of orange juice.
It was definitely a tall drink of OJ. Exactly.
Can I ask why? I mean, that is quirky. Why? What led you to this? I'm confused.
Well, actually, I used to work for the Florida Department of Citrus. So the state of Florida was a huge citrus producer, and I was a marketing person for the state agency. It's actually run by the state government of the state of Florida. And so it was my job to create marketing campaigns and promotions and things like that in my local Seattle area or my region for the Florida Citrus Commission. So I built the world's largest glass of oranges. I also built the first official website for the Florida citrus industry as well. So
nice stuff.
It was back in 97 is when I did this. So if you do a search in your favorite search engine, whether it's Google or Bing or whatever, just search for world's largest glass of OJ, and you'll see a picture of it.
Well, that is a first. And you're the second person who's come on the show who had a quirky fact about being in this Guinness Book of Records. I had Matt Shaken Holmes on the show some time ago, and he's in the Guinness Book of Records for the longest handshake, and it was like 4 days long. So you've got to do something extreme to get in that book, don't you?
Yes, you do, and that's actually a pretty good one. I like that, the longest handshake. That's actually great.
It's good marketing. I mean, we're here to talk a bit about marketing, actually. So it's sort of interesting, and it's a good segue into our chat to talk a little bit about podcasting and how podcasting is changing the shape, the businesses market, and the way that consumers see business people or professionals as well. Tell us a bit about your background and how you got into the podcasting scene.
Well, I got in it probably from a little bit of a business perspective as well. I started doing consulting work in the search engines. I mean, around helping people optimize their websites for search engines. And so I just walked into a local radio station in the Seattle market and asked them if they were doing a technology talk show about trends around what was happening with the World Wide Web and the internet. And this was back in 1999. And so that's kind of how I got started. I did a radio show in a local, like a radio station in a local market in Seattle, and just slowly built that over the years. Wound up taking it out of the radio station and producing it in my bedroom in my home, and building kind of a big distribution of that show on a pre-produced standpoint. I started the first 2 years as it being live in the radio station, but took it home and started pre-producing everything, and then making that show available on syndication on satellite and on the XM satellite radio network. And then a lot of streaming and distribution on online. So that's kind of how I got started doing this. I sold advertising on the radio as well as in my downloads or in my streams that I had. I was using real streaming technology. I was using Windows Media streaming technology back in those days. And then when podcasting started in 2004, it was really easy. I mean, I was already encoding an MP3 file, dropped it into my RSS feed off my blog, and I was podcasting. So I started back in September of 2004 is when I started podcasting. So that's kind of how I got started with this, and kind of always worked full-time jobs for many years while I was doing my podcast, but also spent a couple of years just dedicated full-time to selling advertising and getting out in the community and doing a lot of media and press around the topic of what was happening with the World Wide Web and the internet. It was called the Web Talk World Radio Show is what that was called back in those days. So that's how I got started. Yeah. And then I wound up working for platforms after that, because I started helping other people get their podcasts or get their radio shows online. And it just evolved into me working more on the platform side. And I used to work for a small company called Microsoft. I ran the Zune podcasting platform for 6 years. And then I left there to go to work for Podcast One at podcastone.com as their chief technology officer, and down in Los Angeles. And then started working for Spreaker. And I've been with Spreaker for a couple of years as the head of content. So really work with podcasters, outreach, doing podcasts like yours, Ben, talking about the podcasting space and talking about how Spreaker can be a great platform for those that want to create a podcast and actually do some live streaming too. So it's kind of this hybrid model between the two. But kind of in a nutshell, that's how I got involved in podcasting, and it's helped my business, whether I was doing consulting or just as a career, and building my reputation in a particular career area as well. That it helped me as a consultant, and it's helped me build a career for myself.
So let's talk about that aspect of it, because I think most of the listeners of this show are in business for themselves, and they're looking. I mean, and in this day and age, what I've noticed in the last few years in particular is on-demand content and content online being well syndicated is becoming really popular, which means the space becomes busy. Yet podcasting is still a way that I think for a business owner, they can set themselves apart, because it is a little bit more, I think people perceive it as a little bit more difficult to do, a bit like having a YouTube channel and producing videos or quality videos on a regular basis. So I think it's still a great avenue for people that want to get content out there and cut through all the other content. What would you say to somebody who's in business that's not podcasting? Should they be podcasting? Do you think it's a definite thing that they should be doing as a marketing strategy moving forward?
Well, I think you need to look at a couple of different aspects of it. I think you need to look at yourself and what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. And then think about your philosophy about how you're trying to go to market and how you're trying to reach maybe your base of possible customers that maybe would want to work with you and buy your products or your services for your company, and just see if there's a match there. I mean, some types of businesses that you might want to start maybe don't fit great with doing a podcast, but other businesses, maybe, especially consulting type businesses where you're really selling yourself as an expert, can really help you kind of develop that market for yourself and that perception and that reputation. I would think about it really as building deep relationships with audiences and customers. That's how I would use it as a business tool. A lot of people use it as a platform to sell consulting services or sell training or selling books or selling those kind of things, which can work well as well. But there's other people that maybe have their own kind of company that sells widgets or sells a custom product or something like that. That there's a market that needs to be educated about that. And I think it can be used in that way as well. So I think that there's a lot of uses, or you can just build a show that the whole purpose of the show is to build an advertising model around your show, and the show is your business. So I think it goes the full spectrum. I think you can do a lot with podcasting, and it doesn't have to be one model. It can be a lot of different models to find success in a way to build a business around that show.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, because I think there are people. I mean, I had John Lee Dumas on the show some time ago, and he has turned podcasting into his full-time business. I think he has an episode every day. The guy's pretty committed. Yep. And then you see other businesses that, you see a lot of people who are consultants or specialists, coaches, advisors, using podcasts as a way to get their message out there. And I think that's a great tool. What's the weirdest business or the most obscure thing you've seen in your travels that a person that's podcasted with a business where you went, well, I didn't think they'd be able to use podcasting as a marketing medium, but it worked?
I think that the one that kind of jumps to my head a lot is I talked to a guy once that built a show about pool cleaning. So he had a consulting business where he worked with people to clean their pools. And so he created a show about that topic and shared little tips and tricks that he has. And he built a little following for his show. It wasn't a huge show. And I think as you get really niche in your content, it may not reach, 1 million people, but you might reach, 1,000 people or 500 people. And if your goals are, fairly local and you're trying to build a reputation for yourself, I think that's the key. I think success in podcasting comes at all levels. It doesn't come from just having 1 million people listen to your show and you're able to sell advertising. That is one measure of success, but I think that there's other measures as well, and that's how you connect with your audience and how it helps grow your business and make a deeper connection with your customers.
Now, you mentioned before, you'd been involved with the radio and spent some time as a radio broadcaster. How have you found the differences between radio and podcasting?
Well, radio is quite a different medium, I believe, than podcasting is. Radio is restricted based on its model, and that's kind of a tune-in, tune-out model. People are coming in and coming out of radio stations very frequently as they get in and out of their cars or between commercials. They'll change stations. So radio is quite a different model. I think people tune in and tune out constantly. Podcasting has a show has a beginning and an end, and people make a commitment to come in and download a particular episode of a show, and they'll listen to the majority of it. Usually, they may not make it all the way to the end, but they may listen to it in chunks. So I think the consumption model is really what drives the difference. Plus, the advertising models are quite different between podcasting and radio as well. There's much fewer advertisers typically in podcasts, so you have less commercial messages that you have to either fast forward through or skip over or change the stations for, and those messages tend to be much more personal and much more testimonial based. So they tend to be a little bit more trusted, and a little bit more effective in helping that advertiser reach an ROI, just based on just the medium itself, which is quite different than radio. And you're oftentimes seeing the cost per thousand revenue around a podcast to be quite a bit higher than the CPM or cost per thousand for a radio spot, which tends to be dramatically lower, just because of that tune in out. And the whole frequency aspect is a big issue with radio, but it's not so much of an issue with podcasting because you've got that captive audience. You're not as concerned about frequency when it comes to podcasting.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, advertising is totally different. And I guess, people listening to this podcast may be thinking about starting their own podcast, but another avenue is that maybe they could use other people's podcasts to market their goods or services.
Yep, that is true.
Yeah, and
it is a great way to, running ads in other people's podcasts is a great method for growing your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, if they're more testimonial based or review based, or even a chat like this, it's definitely comes with a little bit more credibility, a bit more trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think you're making a personal connection with somebody that's listening, and I think that there's an obligation on the podcaster side and the guest side to be truthful and authentic and honest with what they talk about on their program, because that's what drives credibility. It needs to be believable. It needs to be, it needs to have some common sense. It needs to have a certain level of just honesty.
Now, I haven't looked at the stats for a while, Rob, but I remember when I looked at them a couple of years ago, the growth in podcasting was phenomenal. The percentage of uptake of new people coming and listening to podcasts was definitely on the increase. I mean, you see radio stations now, like I might hear a very popular local radio station, they'll podcast everything. So if you miss something, they say go back and listen to our podcast. What's going on in 2017? Have you looked at the stats? Can you give us any sort of a snapshot of where it's heading?
Yeah, podcasting is continuing its its path of being a medium that is really kind of consistent with what we're seeing happen with TV and movies and music and stuff, where this on-demand aspect is becoming just a huge influence. I mean, I think that the radio side and the audio side has been a little bit lagging when it comes to the adoption of on-demand. And I think that what we're seeing is just there's a recognition that that now is the time for audio to kind of step up and be a part of that. And we've seen a lot of growth in the on-demand aspect of all these other mediums. Radio or audio was just lagging, and so now we're starting to see that as quality content's coming into the medium, as more revenues coming into the medium from advertisers, that there's a lot more credibility being given to the medium based on those trend lines. But if you look at the overall adoption of podcasting and usage and content creation, it's been a pretty steady climb over the last 13 years. Every year the listenership numbers go up and up and up across the industry, and then every year the growth in content is going up as well. The amount of shows and things like that have been steadily increasing. I think we did go through a little bit of a spell from 2008 to maybe 2010 where we saw a little bit of a slowdown in the content creation side. But the listenership side continued to grow, just at a little bit slower rate than what we're seeing today, which is growing at a little bit higher rate of on the listenership side, which is fueling the whole business side of podcasting too, the advertising and the platform side as well. Like platforms like Spreaker or whatever are growing pretty rapidly right now because there's new people getting into the medium that are creating shows and creating terrific content. And that, I believe that we're in kind of a content era right now, where content is really leading the adoption of this medium as it gets better and more genre types come into it. It's attracting more people from cross age groups. The demographics of listeners has been a little closer to what the general population is today. So for many years, this medium was leaning pretty heavily towards the being a male dominated medium, with a lot of technology shows and things like that. But now it's leaning almost equally on men and women, and at all age groups. So it's definitely moving in the right direction to become truly a mass medium, and I think we're pretty much already there.
Yeah, and I think it's a great movement, because for me, me personally, I love the on-demand audio, and I've things like audible.com. So the audio books for me have been something I've always loved, and always I used to go on my local flights where we've got Qantas Radio, and they always have interviews on there with a fellow called Adam Kohler, who I was interviewed by once, and they put those shows on flights because they had to have on demand because they couldn't stream radio signals into the aircraft. So they've had podcasting for a long time, really, when you think about it.
Oh yeah, that those type of mid-flight kind of audio programs have been around for a long time. I know Delta and United had programs like that for many years, and I think a lot of them still do.
Yeah, and I know you can see that those it's starting to become serious when those companies start taking mainstream podcast shows and putting them in flight. In Australia, Virgin Australia now have Timbo Reid's the big, I think it's the Small Business Big Marketing show, as one of the things that you can listen to on those flights. And I think it's great to see those organisations starting to partner up with content creators and put their content on their flights, but also showing us that it is becoming a serious medium that people should be thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Now, you mentioned the increase as well in the number of shows. Do you think that is because it is getting easier to develop a show? You mentioned the things like Spreaker. It is getting easier, isn't it, to be able to produce your own show?
Yeah, I think that the costs of creating and hosting your own show have come down pretty dramatically over the years. Back when I first started back in 2004, I had a $20,000 studio that I had to use to produce this content, and now you can get pretty inexpensive tools. You just use your smartphone. Really, you could pretty much do an entire podcast on your smartphone that sounds of high quality. And that just didn't exist in the past. You had to get really serious. You had to get a mixer, and you had to get high quality microphones, but now it's a lot easier. And the whole hosting costs as well have come down dramatically too. Bandwidth used to be pretty expensive. Back when I started, I had to have my own co-location facility. So I had to have my own servers that I put into a data center that would handle the streaming and the downloads of the program that I was producing. But now you can just host it in the cloud with a platform like Spreaker or a variety of other platforms that make it really easy for you. You can even do live shows as well. So
yeah, it's made it real easy. Well, maybe we could dive into that, Rob, because I think a lot of the listeners would probably be keen in learning how do they start their own podcast. Have you got some tips for somebody that's thinking about starting out?
Yeah, it's really fairly straightforward. You got to come up with an idea what you want to do. You need to get a microphone of some sort. You need to get some artwork pulled together that will represent. So kind of put together some marketing, branding, name for your show. That artwork is size, like 1400 by 1400 pixels is what is required by iTunes as a minimum spec, and just make the artwork, square artwork, colorful. Use bold text to show your show name. Use a colorful background, and then just make an RSS feed. Work with a platform like Spreaker at Spreaker.com to get all that stuff up there, build out your metadata. But really the big thing is have an understanding of what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, what the purpose of the show is, how does that mesh with your life, how does that mesh with your time. Can it be a topic that you can come up with content every single week for a long period of time? Because podcasting is a little bit like a marathon run. It's not a short sprint, which I think a fair amount of people come into the medium they have a great idea and they start producing shows. And after about the 7th or 8th show, they kind of run out of things to talk about because they didn't really think about the long term of how you can keep content flowing and have it be relevant. And using your audience is a really valuable component for that, to getting feedback from your audience to hear about what they want to talk about and questions and comments and things like that you can inject into your program that can bring other topics or other themes to the program and represent what your audience is looking for too. So it's a complex thing to start a podcast, but the costs are pretty low. I mean, you can just get like a basic USB microphone, like an Audio-Technica ATR 2100 is a great one to start with. It's like $89. Will get you a really high quality microphone. And you can use a platform like Spreaker that offers free recording and live streaming software that you can install on your Windows, Mac, iOS device or Android device to actually do the recording right in there or live stream it. So, and those tools are free. So, really a microphone, a laptop, or a computer or something like that. And if you have like a laptop or a desktop computer, either a Mac or whatever, you can even pull in Skype calls, kind of like what we're doing right now to produce your podcast. And there's no cost for that. So really the only cost you have is your laptop and a couple of microphones. You can plug up to 4 USB microphones into your computer and have it all go into the Spreaker software. So you don't even need a mixer. So, which is really, really powerful. So it's just a hosting plan and a microphone, or you can even use your iPhone or your Android device to be your microphone.
And you're in and you're in business.
Yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
good.
Exactly. I mean, it's really that simple now.
Yeah.
And you might want to over time upgrade and get a professional microphone and get a mixer if you want to, but there's nothing to stop you from just getting started and keeping your costs low and come up with a really compelling content offering, I think is key. And then just start producing episodes, get started. At the beginning, nobody's going to be listening anyway. So as you get better as a podcaster, you will actually grow your audience. And that's kind of the evolution of it. There's no reason to pre-produce a bunch of episodes before you get started. Just get it up, get it going, and learn as you're producing these, and that'll grow your show right there. And you get started now instead of waiting a month or two to get started, until you get it perfect.
I think that's great advice. A lot of people have asked me that. Did I pre-record a bunch of shows in the beginning? And I didn't. When I started, we're up to episode 142 now. So I've been doing this for a few years, and I had another show which was a daily show, which was the Business Tips show, which we had going for a while. And it is, I think the key thing of what you said there in the beginning when I asked you about starting a podcast, you said a lot of people start a podcast, do 7 or 8 episodes, and then run out of either ideas or they run out of enthusiasm because you don't see the results that quickly, do you?
Not usually, unless you're a big celebrity or a star or something like that gets a lot of media attention at the prospect of you doing a show. It's something that you're going to have to build over time, and you're going to have to do outreach to your network and your business community and the people that and spark some word of mouth marketing, because that's the key of this. Is that this is a reputation based medium. It's people sharing. I heard this great podcast about this topic, and go check it out. That's how a lot of shows grow, is just that word of mouth communication. You got to get in front of real people. You have to do your PR, do your social media, do your real world outreach too, and get out there and be a part of your business community and be a leader. And that's how you maybe get involved in some other media as well. Maybe you get on other, like you're an expert, you get on TV shows, or you start writing in a blog, or you use other media as a conduit to build your reputation and to build your search engine links as well, which can drive more audience back to your podcast.
Yeah. Now you were talking about a weekly show. Is weekly, from all the stats you've seen? I mean, you talk to a lot of podcasters. You work working within Spreaker. Do you see any stats that validate whether weekly is the right amount? Should it be daily? Does it have to be consistently weekly? Can you be spasmodic because it is on demand content? What are the rules around that?
I don't think there are too many rules per se. You can do whatever you want to do. I think that's the power of podcasting. I think what you're asking for is what the recommendations are, and that would be weekly is where the sweet spot is. But there are successful shows that do a couple episodes a week. There's other shows that do 5 days a week. I would say that the sweet spot of where you see the most efficient use of your time and the growth of audience typically is in the twice a week and once a week models. So you don't see too many shows get really big as daily or every month or anything like that. Those are at the extreme ends of the spectrum around content creation, and most people just don't have the time in their lives to carve out that much time for you. So it's or if you're not frequent enough, then people lose interest and move on to other programs. So I'm not a big fan of this whole trend line around seasons, because I've been podcasting long enough to see how audiences are built, and that's typically around consistency and being there and being regular and being a friend that's always available. I guess it also depends on what kind of show you're creating too. If you're not creating a show that makes personal connections with people, that they view you as almost like a friend that they want to have regular coffee with, and that's kind of what podcasting at its roots is really all about. That's the kind of relationships you want to build, and in order to build those, you need to be fairly consistent with your production and your new content availability and things like that.
Now, you spoke about getting clear on what your content is going to be. Do you think that they need to plan out the first 10 episodes, or are you talking more about what's the format of the show going to be? Or when you say get clear on the content you're going to create, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, the idea is to get clear about your format is very important, but also just get a big picture of what the topic is and what you're bringing to your audience from a content perspective, and that is something you really have to think about, because if you're not able to do that every week for a couple of years, you may run into a period of time when you're like, I don't know what to do next week, and unless you have some process involved that you've developed for you to come up with whatever topic that is, whether it's having outreach with your audience or doing research online and being in touch with what's happening in your particular genre of focus, to stay up to date with what's happening in that particular industry or in that field of expertise, then you're going to run out of things to talk about. So you really have to be active constantly to keep that flow going, so you feel like you're able to represent yourself as a leader to the community that you're trying to serve, and that's a pathway to keep from burning out. It's also a pathway to keep you from just running out of things to talk about. I mean, there's always going to be the danger that life's going to get in the way, and you're not going to be able to continue podcasting because maybe your wife gets sick, or your child needs extra attention for a month or something because of some issue that pulls you away from being able to spend the time that you need to keep the production going with your podcast.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about production, because I think it's important. People come up with their content, they say, yes, I'm going to start podcasting, and I think production in the old days, you said you used to have your own server and you went to all these different lengths to produce your show. It probably took a lot more time back then than it does now. What does somebody realistically need to allow time-wise to produce a weekly show?
I think it depends on how you're recording it and what your philosophy is around editing. there's two sides of the camp around. I think what your core question is really is what's the time commitment that you're willing to and able to commit to your program, and how that translates into how you produce your content and how you publish your content. There's many people that just don't have time to do a lot of post-production, so they put all their energy into the pre-production time frame, so they're able to produce the program in a time-efficient way that will be consistent in its content quality, but also is efficient with the host's time, and that usually upfronts the program into more pre-show planning and pre-show organization, where those that are a little weak on the pre-show side or the pre-production side tend to make up for it in the post-production side. So and there's two ways of producing a show. You can either produce it in segments, or you can produce it as though it's live, right? It can be recorded as live, and you play audio bits or you play intro music as part of your recording process, or you can record those things as separate audio tracks, and then in editing software you combine them to create your episode. So it depends on what end of the spectrum. If you feel confident as a speaker, as a presenter, that you can present in a way that you're not going to need a bunch of editing in the end, then I think that should be your goal of trying to produce it as a pre-produced program or a more live produced program. If you're concerned about maybe your speech patterns or your communication or how you assemble your show, you may need to think more about kind of post-production aspects. So you just produce different segments and then you piece them together in software. But the Spreaker platform does enable you to do a live-like recording of your podcast and be able to play those soundtracks and the intro music and things like that while you're doing the show, and not have to do that in post-production. So I know it's a complicated topic of trying to get the content right that fits with you, but once you get started, you'll feel it out. It'll start making sense to you once you get started. Just start somewhere and produce an episode, and then try and refine it and get it as easy as possible to produce. And that's a pathway that will either take you down a path to success in this medium, or you'll struggle and you'll wind up stopping. So you got to get that figured out.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about you just get on with it and you'll work it out. When I first started, I'm a bit of an audio star. I come from a musical background. I'm a musician, and having spent a bit of time training on sound desks, I was quite fussy about my sound quality in the first few episodes, to the point where I had only one listener, but I was grateful. This one listener actually emailed me and said, "Ben, stop worrying about your sound quality. Your show's awesome. Just keep recording shows and it'll be fine."
Yeah. Yep.
And
then just make little tweaks to the show each week to improve it, or to streamline something, or to add this little segment to the program that maybe connects with the audience at a deeper level, and learn from your audience and learn from your production, and just be open and listen to other podcasts too, if you have time to kind of pick up little tips and tricks about things that you can do. And maybe you pull this little piece out of this show and you pull this other piece out of another show, and you say, well, I'm going to do that in my show. Because that makes sense for what I'm doing. And you just keep trying things, and over time you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like that famous photographer saying, Henry Cartier, he said your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. I think with podcasting, your first 10, 20 shows are going to be your worst, but you can only go up. Yeah.
That's right.
So tell us a bit about the Spreaker technology, because I'm interested to learn more. When I started podcasting, there wasn't an option like that around that was easy or accessible. I have a mixing desk. I have a digital recorder. Mine's a little bit more cumbersome. It's not very mobile. It's set up in a studio. But by the sounds of things, what Spreaker's done is made it so you can just buy a microphone, plug it into a device, and off you go.
Yeah, it's really that simple. I mean, you obviously have to get a hosting plan, but the hosting plan comes with everything you need, from live streaming capability to being able to record and publish. And it has, you can get a custom app for your show. You have a landing page on the Spreaker platform. There's listening apps. So there's all of the tools, and those publishing tools are free. So to be able to do both live or just pre-produced and just publish. And then it gives you all the tools and the RSS feed that you need to get into iTunes and get into Stitcher and get into TuneIn and all of the key listening platforms. The iHeartRadio, a lot of the up and coming listening platforms like Google Play Music podcasts. You can get in there, so you get all of the key tools that you need to be able to distribute your show, and that just comes with every plan.
Yeah, that's awesome. And because I know in the beginning that was quite a complex thing. Even just getting the show on iTunes wasn't easy. Getting that happening. You had to buy plugins and do all sorts of things. Now, with the Spreaker on their site, do you have tutorials to make it easy for people to set up their show format and so not just the technical side, but the logistical side of the show itself?
Yeah, there's some. If you just go to YouTube and type in the word Spreaker, you can see a bunch of video demos that are up there as well about how to publish in Spreaker. But Spreaker also has a free plan too, so you can get in. It's the free speech plan that you can just get in and look around and learn about the platform that's available to anybody. And plus, you can register just to be a listener too, which will give you access to all that stuff as well. So you can get in there and start learning, and then watch other videos on how to podcast, and just type in the word podcasting into Google or into YouTube or any of these platforms, and you'll just get a wealth of information and tips about how to do it.
Yeah, I think when I kicked off, I actually listened to a podcast by a guy who helped people podcast called Podcast Answer
exactly.
Man. I don't know if Cliff Ravenscraft's still doing it, but he was a pretty avid podcaster. And then Pat Flynn from the Smart Passive Income had an online tutorial on what gear to buy, microphones and mixers, and that's how I started. But it sounds like you guys have put it all in one place, making it easy. So if someone's listening and they're thinking, you know what, I'd like to give this podcasting thing a go, they can head across to Spreaker.com and check that out.
Yeah, and I also do a podcast every week called the Spreaker Live Show that actually talks and shares tips and tricks about how to use Spreaker and how to best podcast. So that's available every week. That's live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I do it out of Seattle, up in the U.S. And then on Saturday mornings I do a show with Todd Cochran, who's the CEO of Blueberry, Raw Voice, the PowerPress plugin. So we talk about podcasting trends in the industry, and that's on Saturday mornings. And we usually do that live on YouTube and Facebook, but it's also an audio and video podcast. It's called the New Media Show, is what that's called.
Great stuff. Well, I'm just mindful, Rob, we're running out of time. Is there anything else people can do to make contact if they want to find out more? I mean, you've given out a bunch of great resources there. Is there anything else you'd like people to, if they want to connect with you in some way?
Yeah, if you want to follow me, you can certainly follow me on Twitter. That's just at Rob Greenlee. And then Spreaker also has a Twitter account too, at Spreaker, and that's with an R. And just go to Spreaker.com and you can learn about, podcasting, and you can listen to podcasts right there as well. And I do have a website, robgreenlee.com. But the two podcasts that I do is actually at SpreakerLiveShow.com and then NewMediaShow.com.
Great stuff. Well, we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes, because I know if you're driving along or jogging on the treadmill, there's no way you would have written all that down. But Mike, our show note writer, Mike Borman, he's a great bloke, does all our show notes for us. He'll be listening right now, so shout out to you, Mike. He'll write all those show notes down and make sure no one misses out on those, Rob.
Great. That sounds fantastic, Ben.
Mate,
thank you so much for having me on your show.
I can't thank you enough, mate, because I know the world of podcasting is on this growth spurt, and many people are scratching their head going, how do I get in on this merry-go-round of what seems to be a new form of marketing, especially for business people. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, well, thank you. There's only one thing left to do, my friend, and that is the 60-second scramble. Are you ready for that? All right, let's do it. All right, starting the clock now. Favorite app on your phone?
Podcast app on Windows Phone.
Like it. Your favorite movie?
Star Wars.
Star Wars fan, eh? Do you have a hidden talent?
I played basketball for 13 years.
No, I'm glad you said it wasn't drinking, 750 gallons of orange juice.
Yeah, well, I'd be a little overweight, I think. Yeah.
What's your biggest addiction?
Probably podcasting.
Yeah, I like it. What's the strangest thing you've ever eaten?
Strangest thing I've ever eaten. A mushroom.
It's not very strange. There you go.
I know I don't like mushrooms, though, but it was strange for me.
There you go. Number one tip for being more efficient?
Plan ahead. Make a to-do list.
What's your best way to tune out and relax?
A couch and watching a good movie.
Love it, love it. Once again, Rob, thanks so much for spending the time with us here today. I'm sure that the listeners, I know I got a lot out of it. I always love chatting to people about all things growing businesses, and I'm sure podcasting is the way for a lot of them to grow their business. So thanks again, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
Learn more to earn more.
Well, I'm sure you learned something there. There's no doubt about it that I was learning stuff here as well. I've been podcasting. This is episode 142. I've done a few of these now, and, it's always inspiring and eye-opening to talk to somebody else who's in podcasting. And I love Rob's tip, the tip where you go and listen to other people's podcasts to see what they're doing. And what is it you like about their shows that connect with you or that you think would work for you? Because I think, one of the challenges people have is go, okay, well, what do I do? Well, it's a brand new platform. Like if I said you start a television show, you'd probably go, yeah, well, I know what television shows do because you've watched plenty of them. If I said start a radio show, you probably have an idea of that, or a talkback show. As where a podcast, maybe you're not really clear on what podcasting is all about. But essentially, it's your very own radio show that's pre-recorded and can be downloaded on demand. And as I said with Michelle's iTunes review at the beginning of the show, at the top of the show, she said she'd been listening to all the shows and slowly working her way backwards. She was at number 79. Now, that's something that you can't do with any other media that's audio. It's very difficult to go back and listen to all the last episodes of a radio program. Now, they're making it easier because, you look at the bigwigs of radio. I hear them. I listen to Hamish and Andy sometimes, and they are podcasting, right? All of their shows are live streamed or recorded onto podcast. And we hear people all over the world now tuning into their shows. I heard something about a tweet the other day. Somebody famous was saying, I can't do so. I just wanted to go to bed, or I can't sleep at night because I have to listen to these Hamish and Andy episodes. So podcasting really is changing not just the way we consume media, but who is able to consume our media. And I think that's a really cool thing. So if you are thinking about podcasting and you want any tips from me, feel free to hit me up inside the Business Brain Food group. It's facebook.com/groups/Business Brain Food. Join that group. There's a few hundred business owners in there right now having a chat about all things business, but I'm happy to answer your questions about podcasting to help you understand the best way to get the most out of a podcast. I've also just redone a YouTube video, or a video, I shouldn't say YouTube, it's going up on our YouTube channel, on my podcast setup. So you can see now my podcast setup cost a couple of $1,000s. It's a bit more of a serious setup, but as you can see, our audio quality is there. I have the ability to pipe in Skype callers, phone callers, add music whilst we're live on the show. So I have a thing called a sound cart that I use, so I can quickly press a button.
Learn more to earn more.
And by pressing a button, you get an audio file. And that's what Rob was talking about, how efficient you can make your show. And I do that because it saves a lot of post-production. And the way I record the show is I have an intro, a main interview, and an outro. I do the main interview first. I then go and record the intro and the outro, which is what I'm doing right now. And then that gets edited. I have an editor in the US. We upload it into Dropbox. Tom, shout out to you, Tom, good guy who looks after every single episode and makes sure we sound creamy when it comes into your ears. And Tom makes sure it's edited. And if we have any stuff-ups during the interview, he'll take them out. We just have to note down what time it happens, and we let him know if there was noise, static, or anything. So it's very easy to do if you just get the right team together, and it can be made very efficient. So I'm a big fan of podcasting, and I think that it really is the media of the future. And if you get in now, you'll find that as podcasting grows in popularity, a bit like blogging, if you were blogging 10 years ago and you've got, consistently been blogging or YouTubing or whatever, you're ahead of the curve. You're in the front of that wave. And, as the wave builds and gets momentum, you'll be the first to arrive at the beach. And I think, that's the whole philosophy I've got when I started podcasting. If I was completely honest with you, when I first started, I did about maybe 30 shows, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pull the pin on this. It's a lot of work. and I wasn't seeing a return. I thought, no, I'll stick at it. I chatted to a couple of people. I listened to a couple of podcasts. I thought, you know what, I'm going to stick at it. And I stuck at it for about a year. And then I thought to myself, do I keep doing this? Just not getting many downloads, only getting a few hundred downloads per show. But what was happening was very regularly I would have somebody who I'd bump into in the hall, or I would meet with a potential client, or be at an event, and someone would say, hey, I just love your show. And that's all it took to keep that, that little thing inside me ignited to go, you know what, I'm going to keep producing this show. 142 episodes in, what I saw about maybe, let's say 60 episodes ago or 50 episodes ago, when we got close to the 100 mark, was the downloads started to increase dramatically. And I don't know why. Maybe it's the quality of the show, the quality of the questions. Maybe I got better at interviewing. I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that it's just been around so long. But all of a sudden, we started to gain some more momentum. And I think, that was very encouraging. But these days, I don't watch the downloads. In fact, if you ask me how many downloads we had last month, I couldn't tell you. I no longer look at the stats. I used to worry about it. I don't look at it anymore because I know that, it's having an impact, just because every now and then somebody says to me, love your show. So I will ask again, if you wouldn't mind, jump into the iTunes store, leave an honest review or rating. I'd love to hear from you. I read them all. And it does help with the ratings or the rankings of the show. So when someone's looking for a show, just go into iTunes if you're in Australia and type in business. And you'll see Timbo Reed's show comes up. He's got like 350 reviews or something. I think we've got about 29 at this stage. So, those reviews is definitely what's pushing his show to the top of the search engine. And I would love it if you could do that to help me out. That'd be fantastic. That's all I'm going to ask. All right. So that's pretty much it for this week. I hope you really enjoyed Rob's chat with myself, and it gets you inspired to think about, could you use podcasting? In fact, ask yourself this question. Not could you. I want to ask yourself this question. How could I use podcasting to help me market my business? There you go. Ask that question and see what answer you get.
You can fly higher than the sky, shine brighter than the stars. You can live all you ever wanted.
The Business Brain Food Podcast is brought to you by Maxmyprofit.com.au. And don't forget, you can go to businessbrainfood.com.au and listen to all the past episodes and access all the show notes with all the links of everything that's discussed in each podcast episode. Until next time, have a profitable day.